After Donald Trump cynically sabotaged a high-profile bipartisan Senate border bill, which was quite frankly very conservative, the Fox propaganda network finds itself in a hilariously precarious position. On the one hand, they have to balance their cultish devotion to Trump against their ideologically conservative position on border policy. And this tension has manifested itself in truly amazing ways over the past 48 hours, and we've got to talk about it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert buttons before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, so obviously this is the political story at the moment of the time. House Republicans have failed spectacularly in their impeachment efforts against President Biden and Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas. They're not interested in legislating, so really this sabotage of a bipartisan and relatively conservative border bill is basically dominating the political news, and hopefully Democrats will make them pay for it every second of the way. But what's interesting to me is seeing the Fox propaganda network react to it, because again, they're effectively serving two masters, and both masters are in diametric opposition at the moment because Trump feels like he needs a wedge issue to hurt Biden politically ahead of the 2024 election. So he does not want the so-called border crisis resolved anytime soon. So we have several clips to play. And in these first three clips, it features Fox propagandist Harris Faulkner, who she's supposedly one of the straight news people. She's not supposed to be Jesse Waters or Laura Ingraham, but she is awful in her own way and tends to be one of the more partisan, openly partisan Trump supporters. She is speaking to the leader of the Border Patrol Union, right? Somebody who despises President Biden, who supports Donald Trump, but also supports this bipartisan bill. And so we're going to play these clips and unpack them together. And then I've got more clips from Fox hosts who take the completely different position than Harris Faulkner.
I want to give you the chance to tell me in short words what you like about this bill, and then let's go back and forth a little bit with some of the weaknesses.
So there are plenty of weaknesses in here, but there's also a lot of strengths. And when you look right now what we're currently dealing with, this is a slow month, and we're dealing with 6,700 apprehensions on a daily basis. What this would do is it would cap it to where we couldn't take anything more than 5,000. Now, this does not say that we're going to release 5,000 people into the United States. In fact, it's the exact opposite. It says that we will hold single adults in custody. They will not be subject to release. And so that is a huge deterrent. That will deter an awful lot of people from crossing our borders illegally. We know that the main magnet that people cross our borders is because they're going to be released into the United States. Once you stop that magnet, you will stop an awful lot of people from coming. So although it's not perfect, it is a step in the right direction. And I would rather have the step in the right direction than nothing and consign me to what the status quo is.
So again, this guy here, the conservative leader of the conservative Border Patrol Union, a guy who wants very strict, conservatively strict border laws. He's like, listen, this bill isn't perfect from his conservative perspective, but it's actually pretty good on the whole, which is why I've characterized it in my previous videos as a relatively conservative bill. And he's like, let's go it. Let's pass it. And to be very clear, because this is something that's been circulating, there has been a lot of talk about this so-called 5,000 number. Kyrsten Sinema, the Democratic caucusing independent senator who helped co-author the bill, along with Republican James Langford and Democrat Chris Murphy, she has been making the rounds trying to clarify that. She says, listen, this provision is getting woefully and perhaps purposefully misconstrued. The border automatically closes when migrant encounters reach 5,000. This does not mean that 5,000 migrants are permitted to enter the country every day. Some people are trying to say, listen, so that means you're going to let 5,000 undocumented migrants into the country. No. She's saying that after there have been 5,000 encounters between undocumented migrants and Border Patrol, the border automatically shuts down. It removes certain discretionary authority from the president, which leads us to the first real back and forth between Harris Faulkner and this Border Patrol captain, Border Patrol president. This is what he has to say.
So what does it do for a president like a Trump or a Republican to get into office? I mean,
it doesn't tie their hands at all.
Perhaps if that were the case, you would get these numbers to be even lower. So
Harris, it doesn't take away any executive authority. So if President Trump...
Well, if that's the case, why can't we just use that now? Why can't we use the laws that are on the books now?
But he won't. So why not tie his hands with law? That's what laws do.
Why do you think he'd follow the laws coming that you want to see changed if he won't even follow the laws that are on the books right now? If he won't enforce what he's got in front of him?
The Supreme Court in 2023 said that he has the authority to release people. So we can argue that he shouldn't release people. But our
he also
own court
could shut
system,
the border down right now.
Harris, absolutely. But this law ties his hands. This law doesn't allow the Supreme Court to come in and say that he can release people. This law says that if you're single adults, you will be held in custody. It ties his hands, and it will tie any future president's hands. So, of course, I will support that. It does not limit
Well, it's mainly
Trump's
for Democrats, because
executive.
Republicans see the issue very differently.
So Harris Faulkner here, is trying to make the case. I guess she's trying to sanitize or launder the newfound Republican opposition to this bill by poking holes in it. But what this guy is saying is, listen, it doesn't tie, like this notion that it's going to hurt Republican presidents. No, Republican presidents and a Republican Congress can repeal this legislation and attempt to pass even more strict legislation, although Republican senators have acknowledged that that's not going to happen because they would need Democratic votes to do it. So this is the best compromise you're going to get. And she's saying this, she's regurgitating this talking point, which is, okay, President Biden's not following the laws now. This is a new law. Why would he pass or follow the laws, this new law, if he's not following the old laws? And the fact of the matter is, he kind of gives the game away here. President Biden is, in fact, following the laws. It's just that the Supreme Court of the United States granted him discretion. They reaffirmed his discretion in an 8-1 vote in 2023, an 8-1 ruling, that when the president has limited resources and there are encounters and a surge of undocumented migrants at the southern border that exceed the president's ability to handle all of these things, then the president has the discretion. He can do what he wants in terms of prioritization of who to dedicate those limited resources to. So that's what the Border Patrol person's trying to correct Harris Faulkner on. He's like, listen, the Supreme Court of the United States says that Biden has certain discretion. This law, he says, would take that away. It would command the president not to, engage in any sort of discretionary activities and compel him, to apply resources a certain way. It would remove that discretion. And you can tell she's really struggling to try to poke holes in it. So she just throws in at the end, well, this is really a Democratic problem anyway, because Republicans got this on lock, right? She has no refutation for the argument because from a Republican and conservative perspective, outside their loyalty to Donald Trump, there is no good argument against this bill. And last clip from Harris Faulkner, and then we'll go to clips from Fox News hosts who are pretty conservative still, but they take a very different approach than Harris Faulkner regarding the endorsement of this legislation from the Border Patrol.
Whatever goes forth has to be much better immediately.
Harris, we're not going to get much better immediately, so I'm going to take those incremental steps. If this were going to tie Donald Trump's hands, I would be opposed to it immediately. It doesn't. It doesn't tie any good administration's hands.
So why do you think he's against it?
I have no idea. I haven't spoken with him about it. If he has specific issues, let him air those issues. I will give the positive points in this bill. There are negative points. But if we don't even let this bill come to light, if this bill doesn't even go to the fore, we don't even get amendments. And that's what everybody's talking about. Everybody's talking about killing it before you're able to even offer amendments. That's wrong.
It is wrong, even from a genuinely conservative perspective, which I don't have on this issue. But I'm saying, like, even from assuming that you genuinely believe that there is a crisis at the southern border from a conservative perspective, and you think that conservative Republican policies would, ameliorate that crisis, there is still no good argument against this bill. And you can tell that's why he's so frustrated. He's like, listen, I don't like Biden. I don't want Biden to win the election. Didn't want him to win the last election. He even implicitly describes the Biden administration as a bad administration. But he's rational and principled enough to say this is a great compromise. It's the best sort of compromise that we'll get. I would argue they're walking away with the farm. The Democrats gave the farm to the Republicans on this. And again, Harris Faulkner has no refutation of it because she loses the argument. She knows the only reason Republicans are opposing this is because of Donald Trump's patronage, and Donald Trump needs a wedge issue. So this is not Brian Kilmeade. This is Steve Doocy. This is Peter Doocy's father talking to Congressman Tom Emmer about the bill and also about the endorsement of the Border Patrol Union, the very guy who was just in the Harris Faulkner clips. Look at how Steve Ducey handles that endorsement and pitches that endorsement to the Republicans compared to Faulkner.
And I know a lot of Republicans are against it because Donald Trump is against it. But here's the problem for you guys. The Border Patrol Union came out and the acting CBP chief both came out and said it's not perfect, but this is the best thing we've seen in decades. So are Republicans going to say that the Border Patrol Union and the acting CBP chief are wrong?
Well, look, they can have their perspective, Steve, and we've got a lot of respect.
It's their jobs, Tom.
And it's our job to actually make sure the laws will accomplish what we're seeking to.
You see what he just did there? Tom Emmer again, right? Tom Emmer knows that he doesn't have a good argument for this because when it came to, pounding on the Biden administration or on Democrats with respect to the border, they would happily appeal to the Border Patrol Union all the time. Hey, the Border Patrol Union is comprised of Border Patrol experts and officers, people who are there on the ground at the southern border, and they say we need X, Y, and Z. When it's convenient, they'll defer and appeal to the Border Patrol Union. Then when the Border Patrol Union's like, actually, yeah, this bill is really conservative, so I can't believe it has bipartisan support, let's take it. Then Tom Emmer and MAGA Republicans who are, cultishly loyal to Trump, they're like, well, with the Border Patrol Union, we really, we have it's really our expertise here in Washington, D.C. You see the bait and switch and the goalposts moving? It's just Republicans in general. They can't make this argument in good faith because they will lose 10 times out of 10 based on their stated principles and their stated premises. And now you have Martha McCallum, again, who, like Steve Ducey, is a conservative, an openly conservative partisan host. But also, like Steve Ducey, and unlike Harris Faulkner, is kind of perplexed at what's going on here from the vantage point of an alleged principled Republican. And here she kind of puts the fire to Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana.
Obviously, she's very frustrated. She said that in her home state, people they don't care about politics. They want to make at least, and you just said, Senator, that you were looking for some provisions that would improve, right? And when you go through this, and I understand that people on both sides have very big, differences over this, but you don't think there were some provisions in there that were worth moving on?
I can't predict the future. I have to wait for it like everybody else. But I don't see how anybody could look at this bill and confidently predict it would have been an improvement.
Well, the chief of the Border Patrol just said exactly that. Don't you think that he probably knows better than anybody what would have helped his people out a little bit?
And I have great respect for him, but I disagree with him.
Again, you see the look on her face. He has no good faith reason to disagree with the very expert to whom he constantly appeals and defers. This is classic textbook Republican dirty pool, of which they are uniquely susceptible and uniquely inclined to engage in. Democrats don't do this a quarter as often. This is what I'm talking about, folks. The reason I found this so interesting is because so often Fox News will contort itself to accommodate elected Republicans. But here you have a bit of a divide because presumably, even though this makes them somewhat partial to Trump, Steve Ducey and Martha McCallum, they are also presumably, at least at some level, principled conservatives who actually believe at some level, in some ways, the things they say. Right now, the cultish devotion to Trump and their stated conservative principles are in diametric opposition. There's no way to square it. None. Which is what this tension reveals. Now, Harris Faulkner's clearly made her decision. She just wants to back whatever Trump says at any time, right? Very little pushback, if ever. But Steve Ducey and Martha McCallum are providing pushback. And this is what will give President Biden, Democrats, and their surrogates the opportunity here. They need to relentlessly pound this home because there's actually a foothold, not just in mainstream media, not just in CNN and the New York Times, but even on the Fox propaganda network. There's something here to exploit. There's a window to show the truth that even Fox News thinks this is ridiculous, and it gives President Biden time, if he works diligently, to change the narrative. Let me know what you think in the comments.